Greetings, travelers. I hate motion blur in video games. Okay, hate is a strong word, so let me rephrase that. I despise motion blur in video games. Just let me and my ancient PC run the game at 21 frames per second in peace. Games that don't allow me to turn this off immediately go on my wave fist at angrily list. One time I mentioned something along these lines and someone chimed in, I know, it's a big accessibility option. At the time, I was a little confused because I never really thought of it as a form of access, but more power to the people who advocate for giving us the option to get rid of this shit. Then in the exact same verbal paragraph, they also brought up easy modes, and I simply knew I had to politely exit the conversation. A few people reached out to me to share my perspective on accessibility as part of my follow-up to a video on difficulty. In video games, that's what we talk about here. The two get discussed together quite a bit, not for unfounded reasons, but they don't always have to. Access is about access, and doesn't always directly relate to difficulty. Access also includes what platform a video game is available on, how expensive those platforms are, how easy it is to purchase, and how easy it is to start playing. This is not about whether we truly own downloadable games or not, but this form of sales has massively increased the accessibility of video games. Physical media is another form of access, though, to people who do not have reliable internet. But if your disc copy still requires a day one patch to function, it instead impedes people's ability to access it. But I know that most people are not particularly focused on this part, especially those who reached out. So instead, what are some common accessibility features included in video games? Closed captions. Something that exists in other forms of media, known as movies and shows. Text on screen that only shows what people say are usually called subtitles, and closed captions include things like background sounds and other effects that are important context for people who cannot hear. Hence why we get things like menacing sound effect. Most video games have subtitles, but can struggle a bit with every other aspect of closed captioning. Because audio cues for things happening in-game that the player is expected to react to can be a problem. Most games do not solely rely on audio cues for everything and will usually have something visual to go along with it, but not always. It's obvious to me that a zombie is right behind me, but if I couldn't hear it, I would have to wait until it's right on top of me and beating my ass. Compare this to Sekiro, where dangerous attacks both have an audio stinger and a visual indicator that you can't avoid them with typical tools. In isolation, something like this, which is in-game and considers multiple senses, is one that I like more than, say, Minecraft just putting text in the corner that tells you where sound is coming from. But I couldn't even pretend to come up with a better solution, and this isn't always super intentional. For anything that requires quick reactions from players, tuning it to multiple senses is considered good practice, unless you have a very specific reason not to. Subtitles are still a form of access just by themselves, but sometimes it doesn't go far enough for some people. I'm obviously focusing on deafness, and there are other things that can help these people too. In online games, text chat is a pretty essential feature. Mute people also exist, and while they might be able to hear me talk shit, the text chat is the only way they can banter back. Text chat existed before voice chat was even possible, so it wasn't explicitly invented for accessibility reasons. And accessibility features can have multiple use cases. These are pretty basic concepts that I think most people have a general understanding of, or at least it starts to make sense when you hear it all being spelled out like this. So, what about other disabilities and the ways they attempt to be accommodated? I know somebody who was born without a hand. He still plays a ton of video games. The most important thing for him is having the option to rebind buttons. He more or less has to do it on a game-by-game basis, but that layer of customization is extremely helpful. There are also different kinds of control schemes, such as gyro controls and flick stick, that can open up other forms of movement that might be more comfortable or possible at all for an individual. Going even further, there are custom controllers that can help accommodate each person's individual needs. The list of accommodations can start to get a bit lengthy, but here are some things I never really thought about until somebody brought them up to me. Removing certain screen effects, such as head bobbing or motion blur, because it's the difference between playing the game and wanting to puke the whole time. Being able to turn down the amount of flashing lights, mono audio. That one sounds kinda strange until you consider people deaf in only one ear. They could use closed captioning solutions, but might not want to because, they could still hear everything. Color tweaking settings for various forms of color blindness, and of course, arachnophobia modes. Or arachnophilia if I can slide in a Shadows Over Loathing reference into one of my videos for the millionth time. But this is one I actually want to focus on. I know multiple people with arachnophobia. In something like Lethal Company, it removes the spiders and replaces them with the word spider hovering around. My friend found this to be perfectly adequate, but the other arachnophobe complained because it didn't matter that the spider was changed to a floating piece of text because in their mind, the spider is still there, and the text is merely hiding it. The spider has not gone away, and the only way to truly fix it is to get rid of them entirely, and this gasoline and match are not going to be used to commit arson. Which is probably the biggest piece of nuance when it comes to accessibility. There is no one-size-fits-all perfect solution to accessibility. There are a lot of different conditions that exist, many different ways to attempt to accommodate them, and what works for someone might not work for someone else. Because of course, people are people. In fact, one solution that might help one person will directly negatively impact someone else. Let's say, hypothetically, you are watching a movie as a family where one person is hard of hearing and another is sensitive to loud sounds. What should the volume be set at so that everyone currently watching is happy? The answer is it's impossible, assuming that we only have access to the volume controls. Once again, closed captions could help the person who's hard of hearing. The sound-sensitive person might also choose to wear some form of earplugs, or the hard of hearing person can wear something like hearing aids, but neither of them might like the way they feel in their ears or how it makes everything sound, and they might not want to read in that moment. This is what I mean when I say there is no one-size-fits-all perfect solution to accessibility. Each individual has to set all the dials to make their own experience the best. Now in a group setting like this, we can bring some social dynamics into it. We can maybe make one person uncomfortable with our current solution and try to compromise the other way for the next time so they're not the only one constantly making sacrifices for every single group outing. However, I won't get too far off track. We are talking about an individual person playing a video game. So, access at a basic level is just about access, whether or not something is possible at all. It will accommodate people, but probably won't perfectly satisfy them. To do that requires opening up a giant menu of options where anyone can fine-tune everything down to their specific circumstances. Because really, could anybody reasonably anticipate every single possible problem and every single possible fix that would make people the happiest? And really, at that point, I would say the last thing to leave open is the ability to easily modify the game. A mod interface that's easy to use is the be-all, end-all solution to allow people to tailor their own gaming experiences to what works best. All of this sounds pretty great, right? Well, at a certain point, if you open up all of the dials and hand it over to the player, I start to wonder if it completely undermines the point of the game. I mentioned screen effects earlier, but I try to imagine something like Amnesia: The Dark Descent with its obnoxious screen effects, or another 2010s YouTube classic of SCP Containment Breach, and it wouldn't really make sense. Maybe it's a little too core to the experience, and being able to turn them off would go against that. Color tweaking for color blindness is a good idea, but the game also has artists who crafted these environments, and swapping things around feels like it undoes their work. Before I get too crazy, that is why I think the last piece of the puzzle for accessibility is always communication. Putting accessibility features behind a wall that simply says, these are here for people who think they need them, but are not our intended way to experience the game. It might sound a little demeaning, but that's access for people like me who want to know what the hell they were thinking when they made this shit. You can also look at cheat codes through a similar lens. However, what if a developer sits down and decides that something is essential and cannot be compromised, even after hearing complaints? This is where I will make people upset. Artists do not owe you accessibility. People are people, with thoughts and feelings and internal worlds and bad anime tastes. They have the ability to make the choice if they want to experience something or not. If it's truly impossible, it's probably not intended for them. With that being said, artists can absolutely change their vision to meet eye to eye with other people. By listening to others, they can decide if maybe that thing they considered unchangeable is more malleable than they originally thought. That's what it means to interact with people and to make things for others. However, I am willing to defend an artist's rights to make a video game inaccessible if that is their desire. If a creator puts their foot down and says, this is how it is, deal with it, or don't play it, that is their right. The goal of accessibility is to make something as accessible to as many people as possible, getting rid of barriers that are not important to the art, the experience. Being able to pause a game is an accessibility feature, and is standard in almost every video game. Yet, some of the hardest parts of Lobotomy Corporation would not work the way they did for me if it was an option. I think the game is allowed to be designed that way, and I think you are allowed to refuse to play a game that is willing to take that ability away. Think of it as having a ramp to get to the movie theater and a spot that will hopefully not make your neck hurt, but not a guarantee that you will like what you see on screen or the fact that it is punching you repeatedly in the face. This is especially true when crafting something that's intended to be abrasive. There's probably already an expectation that not everyone will want to experience it. Whenever I start to talk about this, a certain argument likes to come out of the woodwork. Chair, you say that now. But what if you're in an accident and you can no longer do the things you love? You'll want everything to be accessible then. Well, not to share too much about myself. Fair warning, my descriptions might get a little bit graphic. When I was a young chair, I got a home science kit as a Christmas present from my grandparents. Innocent stuff, honestly. One part of the kit required me to thread an L-shaped glass pipette into a cork with a little hole that was bored through it. I think it was to capture gas as part of one of the experiments. It didn't go in smoothly. Through much twisting and applying constant pressure, it finally snapped into place. Or so I thought. As I looked down to instead find that the pipette had shattered and went straight through my palm. The pain hadn't registered at that point, and I knew it was going to get a lot worse, so I ripped it out before running inside to freak out the rest of my family, who promptly wrapped my hand in bandages and put it on ice as they tried to keep me from fainting because I was processing what just happened. This accident resulted in glass fragments being stuck in my hand. As a gross fun fact, if you ever get stuff stuck in your body like this, a little bubble forms around it and it will eventually work its way out. It's kinda cool, and still kinda gross. Thankfully, this meant I didn't require surgery, but I do have some amount of chronic pain in my right hand. I don't talk about it much because I don't consider it to be a massive hindrance. It does not impact everything I do. I can still type scripts and I can play video games, but there are things I've had to do to accommodate this. One of the 3 instruments I played in high school was the oboe. No, I don't have a diagnosis. But the oboe is slightly smaller than a clarinet, and I played with a neck strap. Kinda similar to what you would find on a saxophone, perhaps of the tenor variety, so that my hand wouldn't get tired. And my grip strength is still not super great, so I have this tool to help me open jars and stuff. And I couldn't give super firm handshakes at job interviews. Other than some of my buddies teasing me for this and the few bucks I spent on these tools, at worst, I have to take some extra breaks every now and again to let my hand rest. I could still play the piano, and there are people I know who are very accomplished musicians who have way worse problems than I do. People who are fully numb in some fingers but still play better than I ever have. It's almost as if they kept practicing and playing while I decided to play more video games. If instead, someone created a keyboard that allows people to tap along to the rhythm without having to hit the right notes, that can still be cool and fun. But it doesn't necessarily make playing piano accessible. It's making a different experience that can still be enjoyable, but to different people. Plus, look at how thick these lenses are. I couldn't do jack shit without glasses. Also, wishing bodily harm upon me is a little bit rude. I can speak for myself. I don't want things to be made trivial. I just want it to help with my specific problems. I've been talking about access this whole time, and I have not once mentioned easy mode. I merely implied it. At no point have I actually talked about difficulty. I brought it up at the start of the video, but none of these options have to do with circumventing challenge specifically. Some, like the Minecraft sound to text on screen, might make it easier to locate things, but it's a side effect. It is not the main purpose. People can still use it to make things easier if they so desire, but it's not about making it easier, because access is about giving people access to the challenge, removing the things getting in the way of them experiencing what a difficult game has to offer, not removing said challenge itself. People with any kind of disability have a right to experience challenging things. This is another anecdote, so it does not speak for everyone. One of my exes is deaf, and she has a lot of strong feelings about the American education system that tried to put her in remedial classes because of her condition. I could say a lot of things about her, but she is wicked smart. This was back in high school, and she was in multiple honors and AP and college level courses because the only issue is that she couldn't hear. At the time, I was a stupid and immature teenager, so I didn't think much of it, but that experience is something I've heard echoed by many people I've met in my life, where others treat them as lesser just because of their physical condition. For the record, people with mental disabilities deserve dignity and respect too. I surely don't have to say that out loud, but I am afraid to leave that open for interpretation. For someone like my ex playing a challenging video game, she wouldn't want the experience to be made easier to make it accommodate her deafness. She would want it to accommodate her deafness. A friend of a friend has a PhD and he has pretty intense dyslexia. They didn't make his coursework any easier. They just gave him more time to make sure he could properly read things. Because unsurprisingly, difficulty doesn't have much to do with disabilities at all. Even if a person is fully abled, they can struggle with different things and overcome them at different speeds. People co-opting this argument of accessibility in relation to difficulty are actually advocating for things to cater to their preferences, trying to take the conversation of subjective tastes and framing it as one of objective access, taking attention away from other solutions and further research that can make games more accessible and more enjoyable to everyone. Bringing up disabilities as the reason that a video game needs an easy mode is deeply insulting to anybody who happens to have a disability. They are real people, not tokens to be cashed in, and they're not some collective group that will all have the exact same opinion. So, the second curveball in the video is that in spite of everything I said, I still don't have a problem with easy modes or invincibility modes or whatever being added to any video game. Like the rhythmic piano example I made up on the spot, Creating a different mode like this is creating a different experience, but one that some people might really love. Minecraft has had peaceful mode long before they added in many of its accessibility features. You will find people who prefer peaceful mode and those who don't, regardless of their specific circumstances. Lots of historically difficult game series have added in easier options for more modern titles. I think these modes are a good thing, but not explicitly for access. It's for preference. I think it's fine if you offer a mode to remove all the monsters from your horror game, or not. I think developers should be allowed to do both. A lot of this is also predicated on the idea that a game is valued by people's ability to reach some sort of end state, the credits or whatever. I don't think that's always the best way to look at things. Can you still play a video game and enjoy it without ever finishing it? That's not a trick question. I would say yes. Some games are easier to put into this category, such as Breath of the Wild, but I've never finished any version of Ghosts and Goblins, but I still enjoyed the time I spent torturing myself. Sure, open-ended and sandbox games might be better suited for this type of lens, but some people have enjoyed themselves just by swimming for 20 minutes in Deus Ex. If having everyone reach the finish line is the goal of your game, then that's fine too. But assuming that every game needs to be designed for that explicit purpose is misguided at best. The question does start to turn into, what do we believe video games are? A work of expression that has some kind of intention from its creators, tailored to their desired vision, or a product that is designed to be enjoyed where every player gets to tailor it to their specific interests? And where I get to be an annoying fence sitter is that I believe both approaches can work and both are valid. Most games are probably going to be a mix between the two, but that decision and that goal is in the hands of the creators. They get to set the boundary of what they think goes beyond the limits. At the very least, developers should be aware of what choices they make and how it will affect different people. A lot of times, developers are completely ignorant to how seemingly insignificant parts of their games dramatically affect certain people. The goal of accessibility discussion is to draw attention to these issues, and in many cases, they probably should make some changes. But as soon as the conversation shifts to, this game is too hard, or this game is too frustrating, or this game contains something I don't like, we're no longer talking about access. We're talking about preference. Unless it's this stupid fucking sewer segment, good God, what was the plan? Now let's get out there and exercise caution when doing home science in your garage. This voiceover indicates that it's the end of the video. Are you enjoying me stopping myself from letting things balloon out of control? Well, whatever the case, thanks to my patrons for supporting my continual descent into madness. If you want to set your hard-earned money on fire, here are ways you can dispose of it while giving me most of it in the process.